Welcome to another episode of Speed Data, quick conversations with cybersecurity leaders. I'm your host, Megan Garza, and today, joining me all the way from Bournemouth, England, I'm super excited to talk with the Chief Technologist of Cybersecurity for Softcat, Kieron Newsham. Welcome, Kieron.
Cheers, Megan. Nice to be here.
Kieron has worked in the cybersecurity industry for over a decade, including a position in tactical communications for the Ministry of Defense. Kieron, you began your career in the Royal Air Force and served 3 tours of Afghanistan. How did that experience prepare you for a career in cybersecurity?
That's a good question. Well, I think first and foremost, there's obviously a large difference between working in the military and working in a regular career in cybersecurity in the corporate world. It teaches you a lot of soft skills that I think you may not find so easily in the corporate world. There's a tenacity and a resilience about working in the military, being on operations, that I think sets you up really well for what is a really fast-paced vocation in cybersecurity. So I think those two things are probably first and foremost from a soft skills perspective, what I learned and carry over and use every day. I think having to pick things up relatively quickly in high pressure environments, in terms of technology, in terms of organizations, in terms of process, I think is probably the secondary thing I would take from how that's prepared me for my career to date in cybersecurity.
And what drew you to cybersecurity specifically? Why cybersecurity?
I really liked computers. I did various different qualifications at school in information technology. I played loads of video games. So I thought, hey, comms looks cool. Why don't I do that? When I was in my formal training in the military, I forged an interest in deployable communications, which meant I went down the career path of tactical communications, which meant I became acclimatized to operate in hot, sandy conditions, shall we say. From there, anything on operations requires obviously a large level of privacy and security. So it was just best practice then to enact what we would call information assurance or telecommunications security and hardening and things like that. So that's how it started for me.
And I imagine that your military experience kind of helps you to stay calm in the event of an emergency, like a security breach or data leak. What advice do you have for other security leaders on first steps when discovering a vulnerability or exploit attempt?
Patch it or fix it, probably. That is so much easier said than done. I think there's two things that we tend to struggle with vulnerability. The first is scope, and we're bad at scope because we don't understand asset and we can't continuously understand assets. So in order to react fast and find the vulnerability, you have to understand scope first and foremost. And then secondly, you have to understand the assets from a prioritization perspective in relation to that vulnerability. And that is what you would call the exploitability factor of that vulnerability, right? And you want to do those two things really quickly. And in order to do that really quickly, I think you need a consolidated tool sets and a strong vulnerability management program.
What would you say is the hardest thing about your role?
Everything changes and moves so quickly. And there's so many facets to cybersecurity. Everything from governance, compliance, and regulation to EDR, to endpoints, to vulnerability, to threat intelligence, to data security. That's a lot of things that you have to take on if you're not specializing in those areas. So I think the hardest thing is just keeping abreast of what are the latest threats? What are the latest threats to my business? What do I really care about? And I think there's a whole other facet of how do I make other people care about cybersecurity as much as I do? I think that's the hardest thing to end on that as being the most tricky thing that we have to do as cybersecurity professionals and leaders is we're super passionate about it. We know how important it is, but how do you convince a manufacturing business? How do you convince a hospital? How do you convince a financial institution that actually cybersecurity is super important and we really do need to care about it?
What do you enjoy most about your role?
Helping people. I get the opportunity to not only speak to all of our, say, 15,000 plus customers on a regular basis, every day, every week. And obviously they sit across multiple business verticals, multiple sizes. I also get the opportunity to work with a lot of our internal teams and help them. So if I'm not helping someone maybe with their career in cybersecurity, if I'm not helping someone understand a particular area of cybersecurity, or if I'm not helping a customer with an outcome, then I don't know what I'm doing. I'm probably asleep, right? Because that's what I do on my day-to-day basis. And that's what I enjoy the most. I like the satisfaction of feeling like I have made some sort of difference to someone in some guise within cybersecurity.
And speaking of things that you enjoy, I know that you played football or soccer here in America at university, and you live in Bournemouth now. Are you a big Premier League fan?
I am, but unfortunately my team's just been relegated from the Premier League because I'm a Leeds United fan. So I'm not technically a Premier League fan anymore, although it pains me to say that. Yeah, I grew up with football. Football is the game. I know it's traditionally called the world's game, but in the UK, it's the number one sport by a long way. It's much more than a sport. I'm sure quite a lot of my European colleagues that are listening to this will definitely resonate with that. It's a bit more of a culture than it is a sport. But I know it's getting that way in the US, right? I know it's getting quite a lot more followers.
I was about to say, I know what you mean when you say your team is relegated, because I've been watching Ted Lasso. And so now I understand what that means. And I feel like it's brought an entire new American audience to football. So
yeah, but I mean, Leeds have a lot of American players as well, right? Tyler Adams probably being the most famous one, or Brendan Aronson being the other one. Not that I don't know if they'll stay at Leeds since we've been relegated, but there was some comparisons as Leeds being like Ted Lasso, which I thought was quite funny.
So you played in university. Do you ever wish that you pursued football instead?
I mean, there's a running joke in the UK that everyone's had trials at some point. Everyone's had a trial at a big club. And I did have a trial, and it didn't work out particularly well. I was quite small for my age, so yeah, nothing ever came of that at the time, but
it sounds like you are fated for this instead.
Clearly.
So then if you weren't working in cybersecurity, what would you be doing?
Oh, wow. That is an interesting question. I've always quite fancied tree surgery. I don't ask me why. I like being outside. I like trees. That sounds weird, doesn't it? I like trees.
No, trees are vital. We have to have trees.
Well, we need them. We kind of need them, don't we? But yeah, no, I like being outdoors. So I've always fancied, maybe that'd be quite cool to look after trees and the environment and help that sort of way.
Well, thank you so much, Kieron. I really enjoyed our conversation today. I feel like we've bonded over European football. If our audience has any questions they'd like to see on an upcoming episode of Speed Data, or if you want to share some interesting sports factoids for me, please email me at mgarza@varonis.com. Thank you, Kieron.
Thanks, Megan.